Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to talk about the anticipated releases that I have for the first quarter of 2025. It does not feel like I should be doing this video because 2025 can't possibly be here already, but it is. It's just around the corner and it's insane. December has just flown by, but I have, in looking at Goodreads, looking at NetGalley, found some pretty interesting books that are going to come out in the first quarter of the year that I would love to talk to you guys about. I have 25 books to share with you guys today, and all from a variety of genres. I have fantasy, horror, mystery, sci-fi, and some genre blends mixed in there as well. I am going to be separating these by month that they are released instead of separating them into categories because I do have so many blends. I just thought it was going to get a little messy if I tried to separate them by genre. So we're going to go through the January releases first, then February, then March. Keep in mind that I am using NetGalley and Goodreads for release dates, and so I might be slightly off, but as far as my understanding, this is when these books will be released. Due to the fact that I have 25 books, I won't be spending a ton of time on each book, but I will give you guys a synopsis, I will give you guys what genre it is, and any other details that I think you guys need to know. This first book, the information that you need to know, just some, I think it's just interesting. This was one of the potential picks for the podcast for Romantasy. And the reason Leandra and I decided not to go with this one was because we weren't quite sure if it really was Romantasy. We don't know if romance is going to be really heavy in it, but it still sounds really interesting and I would like to get to it. So that is Watermoon, which is, this is just the little synopsis. I won't read you the entire thing, just a little bit of a teaser for you guys. A woman inherits a pawn shop where you can sell your regrets and then embarks on a magical journey when a charming young physicist wanders into the shop in this dreamlike, enchanting fantasy novel. On a back street in Tokyo lies a pawn shop, but not everyone can find it. Most will see a cozy ramen restaurant, and only the chosen ones, those who are lost, will find a place to pawn their life choices and their deepest regrets. And one of the genres in this does say romance, and so that's why we were thinking that it maybe was a romantasy, but it sounds very cozy, and I like the idea of people selling their regrets. Maybe we're going to have some like self-discovery in the storyline. I think it's going to be a dreamlike time, as the description says. Next, we have a horror release that I am interested in, mainly because of the author. This is At the Bottom of the Garden, and this is by Camilla, which is the same author of You Let Me In, which I have absolutely loved. I am hesitant to just call this straight horror because I do think I consider You Let Me In a fantasy horror, which just makes me more excited, but I just wanted to throw that out just in case. The description says, this is a murderess becomes the guardian of two very unusual girls in this mesmerizing gothic novel. Clara Woods is a killer and perfectly fine with it. So what if she takes a couple of lives to make her own a little better? At the bottom of her garden is a flower bed, long overgrown, where her late husband rests in peace, or so she always thought. Then the girls arrive. Lily and Violet are her nieces, recently orphaned after their affluent parents died of an ill-fated anniversary trip. In accordance with their parents' will, the sisters are to go to their closest relative, who just so happens to be Clara. Despite having no interest in children, Clara agrees to take them, hoping to get her hands on some of the girls' assets. Not just to bolster her dwindling fortune, but also to establish what she hopes will be her legacy. A line of diamond jewelry. There's only one problem. Violet can see the dead man at the bottom of the garden. She can see all of Clara's ghosts and call them back into existence. Soon Clara is plagued by her own victims and at war with the gifted girls in her care. Lily and Violet have become a liability and know far more than they should. I think it sounds fantastic. Like I said, I have absolutely loved this author in the past, and so yes. Next, we have another fantasy horror, and this is a debut. This is called Lightfall, and the first paragraph of the synopsis got me, but I'll continue on just a little bit further than that. This is an epic fantasy of vampires, werewolves, and sorcerers. Lightfall is a debut novel of Ed Crocker for fans of J. Kristoff's Empire of the Vampire, which I'm reading in January, and Richard Swan's The Justice of Kings, which I have on my Kindle. So I haven't read those books, but it does intrigue me. And, you know, vampires are fun. This says, no humans here, just immortals, their politics, their feuds, and their long-buried secrets. For centuries, vampires freely roamed the land until the Greys came out of nowhere, wiping out half their population in a night. The survivors fled to the last vampire city of First Light, where the rules are simple. If you're poor, you drink weak blood. If you're nobility, you get the good stuff. And you can never leave. I think it's interesting that we have a city that is all immortal people, that we don't have any humans, and to see how they're going to interact and like what their politics are going to be, I'm fascinated. Next, I have a horror anthology called Doomed Romances, which intrigued me by the title and by the cover, but this is supposed to be, I think, 12 short stories about doomed love. It says, a prophecy threatens a volcanic upheaval for a star-crossed pair. A forbidden rite binds a dark arts dabbler to a phantom bride. A barstool chancer invites a devilish retribution onto the dance floor. And then many, many more. It says that this is bewitching classics by Mary Shelley, Wilkie Collins, Angela Carter, with twisting modern pieces. And I just think it sounds fascinating. I, as you know, am not a big romance reader, but I do like some. I like a romance subplot, and the fact that this is horror focusing on romance, I think this is bound to be a good time. Next we have another horror. I guess January is just full of horror. This one is called Strange Pictures, and this is a debut novel from Japan. So it is a translated work. I don't know how long it's been out, but it's supposedly very, very popular in Japan, and it features a whole bunch of strange pictures, hence the title, that are somehow interweaved in this story to solve a mystery. So it's actually mystery horror. If I didn't say that, I can't remember if I just said horror, but mystery horror is quickly becoming a favorite of mine, and adding in the creepy picture aspect to it, I think it's going to be fun. So we'll see. Next we have a fantasy release, and this is the Outcast Mage. This is a book that surrounds a mage who goes to a magical school, an academy of sorts, and is trying to figure out her powers before her powers consume her in some way. And this was touted as a book for fans of Andrea Stewart, who wrote The Bone Shard Daughter, which I absolutely loved, James Islington, who wrote The Will of the Many, which I also loved, and Samantha Shannon, who I haven't read yet, but I've heard great things about. And so I want to try it. It's debut, so I want to give a new author a try. Let's see if this one works. Next, I have The Ways Up, which is a sci-fi horror that I am really excited about. I think that this sounds fantastic. It has a couple of things in it that I am really intrigued by. So you have a weird tower that appears over England and abducts 13 random people, and a countdown begins. I think there's the word ascend on the tower, and the 13 people that got taken up into this tower have to figure out why they've been called there, what they have to do to survive, and it could potentially have ramifications on the Earth's surface. And there's a countdown, there's random people. It talks about how like each of the people that got taken have some type of issue in their life they are trying to deal with at the time too. I think it sounds fantastic. There was also a comment within the synopsis that talked about how there's a race to the top. So I don't know if they're going to be pitted against one another. I'm intrigued. Next, we have our last January release, which is At Dark, I Become Loathsome, which is an Eric Larocca. It's horror, and I have never read Eric Larocca. I don't think. I'm pretty sure I haven't read anything, but I've been meaning to pick up one of his books, and I feel like this one might be the one. So it says that this is a grim yet gentle, horrifying yet hopeful, intense tale of death, trauma, and love. If you're reading this, you've likely thought that the world would be a better place without you. A single line of text glowing in the darkness of the internet, written by Ashley Luton, who has thought the same and worse in the years since his wife died and his young son disappeared. But the peace of the grave is not for him. It is for those he can help. Ashley has constructed a peculiar ritual for those whose desire to die is at war with their yearning to live a better life. It sounds ominous. It sounds maybe a little investigative of like human nature and your desire to live. So I don't know, I'm curious about it. Next, the first book in February could also be released in January. I found 2 release dates, and I'm assuming that one of them is for the UK and one of them is for the United States, but I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna put it in February, and if it gets released in January, great. That is Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, which is the 3rd book in the Emily Wilde series, which I am absolutely in love with, and I can't wait. I pre-ordered this book. I can't wait to continue on with Emily Wilde's. If you haven't heard of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, it's the first book where you follow Emily Wilde, who is a scientist who studies the Fae in her world and is compiling knowledge to put it into an encyclopedia and disperse to the general public. It's very fun, slightly cozy, there are some high stakes, and there's some, you know, fun Fae and horrifying Fae involved in the story as well. Next, we have a fantasy romance / horror. Which fantasy romance mixed with horror has worked for me before with the Saints of Steel series, and so I am excited to see another one, and this has something in it that I absolutely love. So let me read you part of the synopsis. A young woman forced to live with ghosts in a mansion frozen in time must decide between forbidden love and the price of freedom in this gothic fantasy where Jane Eyre meets the haunting of Bly Manor. I love the fact that she's living with ghosts. It gives me September House vibes. We'll see. This says, at Thorne Hall, a grand estate nestled in the Berkshires, 15 restless spirits roam, bound within their mansion's walls since the Gilded Age. Elgie, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, Elgie Thorne bears the weight of her family's curse to preserve this mansion as it was in the 1890s, using ancient folk songs to keep the spirits secret and silent in order to avoid deadly consequences. I think it sounds like a lot of fun. Next, I have The Wolf Tree, which is a debut mystery novel. And this one I'm excited because it has folklore in it, which is something that I do tend to enjoy in mystery and horror, really. This says it's a remote Scottish island that hides shocking secrets in this page-turning debut mystery laced with dark folklore. And it talks about how the island is known for the disappearance of 3 lighthouse keepers, and that's really all it's known for, but there is a murder that happens in one of the lighthouses, and so some detectives come onto the island to investigate, and they realize that something's not quite right about the island. So I think it sounds interesting. I do like a Scottish setting, and so I'm excited about this one. Next, I have a sci-fi book for you that is called The Fourth Consort. This is by Edward Ashton, who is the author of Mickey 7. And I've really enjoyed the Mickey 7 series, and so I'm excited to see something else by them. This is a standalone sci-fi, is what it says. So that's also kind of fun, not to have a series. You just have, you don't have as many commitments. But this says, Dalton Greaves is a hero. He's one of humankind's first representatives to Unity, which is a pan-species federation working to bring all sentient life into a single benevolent brotherhood. That's what they told him anyway. The only actual members of Unity he's ever met are Bureau, a giant snail who seems more interested in plunder than spreading love and harmony, and Bureau's human sidekick, Nira, who Dalton strongly suspects roped him into this gig so she wouldn't become the next one of Bureau's crew to get eaten by the locals. Funny thing though, turns out there is actually a benevolent confederation out there working for the good of all life, and they call themselves the Assembly, and they don't really like Unity. So you have some politics involved, you have this massive snail who sounds kind of ominous as well. I think it's gonna be fun. The next release is the only middle grade that made this list, and I am so curious about this. This is called The Labyrinth of Souls, and it is a fantasy release. This caught my attention because the first paragraph in the synopsis, it says, this is a darkly inventive fantasy for fans of Tim Burton and Neil Gaiman about a girl who can see nightmare creatures from the forbidden labyrinth of souls. And it talks about how she has the ability to see these creatures that no one else can. And I want to know why. I have enjoyed this concept before, but I don't know that I've seen it done well in a middle grade, and so I'm excited about this one too. This next one is a fantasy that has some horror elements involved. I don't know if it's quite enough to call it fantasy horror, but I am excited to see from this author another book. This is from Richard Swan, and it's called Grave Empire. So Richard Swan wrote The Justice of Kings, which, like I said earlier in this video, is in my Kindle. I just haven't picked it up yet, but they do seem to handle some premises that I am intrigued by. So the synopsis says, blood once turned the wheels of empire, and now it is money. A new age exploration and innovation has dawned, and the Empire of the Wolf stands to take its place as the foremost power in the known world. Glory and riches await, but dark days are coming. A mysterious plague has broken out in the pagan kingdoms to the north, while the south, the Empire's proxy war in the lands of the Wolfmen, is weeks away from total collapse. Worse still is the message brought from the Empress by 2 heretic monks who claim to have lost contact with the spirits of the afterlife. The monks believe that this is the start of an ancient prophecy heralding the end of days, which is called the Great Silence. It is an epic fantasy, and so that's what I don't know if it's going to have enough horror to call this fantasy horror, because I don't know that I've ever read an epic fantasy that is also horror, but I'm intrigued. Next, we have another fantasy horror, and that is The Crimson Road. And I will tell you that this is definitely a cover interest for me. I found this cover and was like, I don't care what the story is about. I need to read it. It sounds interesting. It does say that this is a dark gothic fantasy, which has worked for me in the past and has not worked for me in the past. So it'll be interesting to see where this lies. This is set in the world of some other books this author has read, but it's not stated that it's like number whatever in a series. And so I think they don't have to be read in order, but do your research. I'll do the same before I pick it up. This says it's a tale of vampires, assassins, ancient witches, and broken promises. One of the main characters has a peculiar upbringing, training as a fighter in underground arenas, honing her skills against the worst scum, murderers, thieves that her father would pit against her. She's learned to be ruthless, to kill. And I think her father ends up dying and ends up causing a wave of really bad things to happen, and she kind of has to go in and clean up her father's mess. So I think that it's going to be fun. Fingers crossed. Gothic tales don't always work for me, but this one does sound interesting. I like the assassin vibe. I like the fact that we have an ancient witch involved as well somehow. I'm not going to read on to see where, but I would like to know where that goes. Next, we have the only graphic novel on this list, which is Soma. This is about a comic book artist who is having kind of a little bit of a crisis. She's not working on the work that she dearly loves and is starting to kind of question things. And in the midst of this turmoil that she has in her life, an alien shows up at her doorstep and she has to deal with that as well. I think it sounds really cute. The artwork looks really, really interesting and very vibrant. And so I'm hoping desperately that my library will have a copy of this. If not, I'm gonna have to try and snag one on NetGalley. Next, we have a mystery romance, which the title is what got me on this one. It's called A Crime Brulee Bake Off. And also, the first paragraph is all I'm going to read because I really don't want to know anything else about it. It says, an unexpected romance, a haunting mystery, pastries to die for. The Great British Bake Off show meets a cozy mystery with contemporary romance and a Regency-era twist. I mean, what's not to love? The last February release that I have for you guys is called Secrets Between the Shelves. This is a Christian mystery short story collection. That's a little bit of a mouthful, but I am really excited about it. It's supposed to feature 4 different bookshops that all have mysterious things happen in them. I'm pretty sure one of them, somebody dies in the mystery aisle, and it has something to do with the bookshelves themselves. Like the shelves perhaps come to life. This says, murder and mayhem haunt 4 newly opened bookstores. The mysteries enjoyed in books come to life, threatening 4 businesses. And I think the bookshop owners are struggling as well, and so they have to figure out how to manage these mysteries and these things that are happening in their shop, along with keeping their shop afloat. I think it sounds really cute. I don't normally go for short story collections, but I have 2 of them on this list, so maybe my mind is changing. Next, we have the March releases, and we're going to start with one that I'm really interested in just because of the author. This is called Blood on Her Tongue. This is by the same author who wrote My Darling Dreadful Thing, which I really enjoyed this year. And so I haven't even read the synopsis yet. We're going to experience this together. This says, I'm in your blood and you are in mine. The Netherlands, 1887, lists Lucy's twin sister, Sarah, is unwell. She refuses to eat, mumbles nonsensically, and is increasingly obsessed with a centuries-old corpse recently discovered on her husband's grand estate. The doctor has diagnosed her with temporary insanity caused by the fever of the brain. To protect her twin from a terrible fate in a lunatic asylum, Lucy must unravel the mystery surrounding her sister's condition, but it's clear that her twin is hiding something. Then again, Lucy is harboring secrets of her own. In the last book My Darling Dreadful Thing, there was also an asylum piece to it as well. And so I do think that that might be one of this author's strong suits as far as like maybe researching asylums back then. And it's such a creepy aspect to add into a book that I've really enjoyed. This next book is the only YA that I have on this list because YA and I have not been getting along. This is also a romantasy, so we'll see if this works for me. The first little paragraph of the synopsis is what got me. So this book is titled Our Infinite Fates, and this is how the synopsis starts. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue meets This Is How You Lose the Time War is a fantastical love story that defies death as two souls reincarnate through the centuries. So if you guys are unaware, I recently read and DNF'd Rakesfall, which had a very similar synopsis, and it just didn't deliver for me. I like this premise though, and the fact that it says The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue makes me want to read it, which I know has not done well for me in the past because A Short Walk Through a Wild World also said that it was similar to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and it was not. But I don't know, I really want to read it. I think it sounds really good. If it can be pulled off, if this premise can be pulled off in such a way that it's written for me, I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic, but we'll see if this author can pull it off. Next, we have a fantasy book called The Bane Witch, and in this we seem to have a little bit of maybe thrilling components. We're following our main character who has had a predilection for poisons her entire life. When she was younger, she ingested some poison. She ended up being somehow involved, I'm not exactly sure, in a neighbor's death. Her husband and her have kind of a volatile relationship, and so that has some type of a part to play as well. And she ends up escaping this marriage to go and work for her aunt, where she learns that this predilection is more than just that. It's actually a gift, an inheritance from her family, known as Bane Witches. And so they are actually eaters of poison, and their mission is essentially to rid the world of evil men. And so you follow her down this path, but she also, I think, there's some type of a romance also that might go on. The romance is with a sheriff who's investigating the murders that have happened that I think she had something to do with. And there's also a serial killer on the loose. The book sounds wild and I can't wait to see how it all wraps up. Next is another fantasy book, and it is The Tomb of Dragons, which is the third book in the Witness for the Dead series, which is called Cemeteries of Amalur, I think. But that's all I need to know is we're following Thara Kellohar again, which is a witness for the dead, or who is a witness for the dead. And I can't wait to see how this story continues because The Grief of Stones left me with an ache in my heart. And so we shall see how the story continues. Next, we have a humorous sci-fi by John Scalzi, which the last humorous sci-fi that I read by John Scalzi was The Starter Villain, which I absolutely loved. So that's why I'm jumping on this. But this is called When the Moon Hits Your Eye, and I haven't read this synopsis yet, so let's see. I have heard some little inklings from other people, but I haven't actually read the whole thing, so let's see what it is. From the New York Times, best-selling author of Starter Villain comes an entirely serious take on a distinctly unserious subject. What would really happen if suddenly the moon were replaced by a giant wheel of cheese? It's the whole new moon. One day soon, suddenly and without explanation, the moon as we know it is replaced by an orb of cheese with the exact same mass. Though the length of an entire lunar cycle from new moon to spectacular and possibly final solar eclipse, we follow multiple characters, school kids and scientists, billionaires and workers, preachers and politicians as they confront the strange new world that they live in and the absurd, impossible moon that now all hangs above our lives. It sounds weird and quirky, and that was what Starter Villain sounded like, and I absolutely love that, so I have high hopes. Next, we have a sci-fi mystery, and Leandra, if you are watching this, we need to read this book together because I think it's going to be our jam. So this is called Murder by Memory, and it says it's a memory called Empire meets Miss Marple in a cozy spaceborne mystery helmed by a no-nonsense formidable auntie of a detective. I'm sold already. But if you continue, it says, welcome to the HMS Fairweather, Her Majesty's most luxurious interstellar passenger liner. Room and board are included, new bodies are graciously provided upon request, and should you desire a rest in between lifetimes, your mind shall most carefully be preserved in glass in the library, shielded from every danger. Near the topmost deck of the interstellar generational ship, Dorothy Gentleman wakes up in a body that isn't hers, just as someone else is found murdered. As one of the ship's detectives, Dorothy usually delights in unraveling the schemes on board the Fairweather, but she finds that someone is not only killing bodies, but purposefully deleting their minds from the library. She realizes something even more sinister is afoot. I think it sounds like a blast. I'm so excited. I think out of all of them, out of all the books on this list, I think this one might be the one I'm most excited for. So I hope I'm not overhyping myself. The last release that I have for you guys is a fantasy romance again. Maybe this is the year of fantasy romance, but I think this sounds fantastic. The title for one is Chef's Kiss. It is Spells, Strings, and Forgotten Things. I mean, I would read it just because of that. But it gets better, my friends. This says, a young witch cursed with sacrificing memories to cast spells must decide how much she's willing to lose to save her town in this thrilling magical tale of love and self-discovery. I mean, right there, like, self-discovery is one of the things that I love to see in a fantasy world, especially one that has such drastic things going on. The fact that she's having to give away memories to cast these spells. I also love a memory component. I don't like reading about like Alzheimer's or anything like that, but if we can deal with memory in kind of a really interesting, unique way like this, I'm down. So those are the 25 books that I want to read in the first quarter of next year. Will I get to all 25 on their publication date? Absolutely not, but I am excited to try. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys have any new releases that you are excited about for the first quarter. I know that I probably missed some because, I mean, you can't catch them all. So I would love to have a list in the comments that I can go through as well. Also, let me know if there are any books that I have mentioned that you guys are interested in. I would love to chat with you guys. If you are not interested in chatting today, but you do want to let me know you're here, leave a little cheese emoji for when the moon hits your eye. I would like to see all the cheese emojis in the comments. I think that would be fun. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.